Hello, today is May 19th, 2020, the pandemic series. I'll be your host today for the standard SIG cluster lifecycle call. Let me share my screen. Hope you all are enjoying a fun-filled quarantine like myself. It's day number whatever of quarantine. All right, so let's walk through group topics. Lubomir, you have the first couple ones.
Yes, so I made a small update to the SIG charter, arguably removing some things that are out of scope for the SIG at this point, maintained by somebody else. But the PR saw some comments from steering committee members, such as that we should probably define who is the owner of the upgrade policy in Kubernetes. And I said that Sequence Lifecycle never agreed to be the owner of the policy. But maybe we have to continue the discussion there on this topic. I would imagine that it's SIG architecture that owns the policy with guidance by SIGs such as API machinery, cost lifecycle, node.
Yeah, so we've never owned the policy, to be honest. We've always adhered to the policy. And I believe Jordan and other people, the policy was in existence before the SIG was even created, where they had the N-2 support. It was actually, I think, created by Google.
Yeah, I picked Jordan on the PR, but he did not respond.
Is it in the comments section here? Where's the policy?
If you look at the discussion instead of the diff.
We do procedures. I think procedures and policy are two different things.
Yeah, so I mean, like, as I recall the N-2 policy, it was purely it was a group decision. I think there was a Googler that proposed, I think it was Alex Moore, but if I recall correctly, it's some years ago. But it was at an early Kubernetes meetup in a basement somewhere where we lived in a basement. And it was motivated by the idea that, like, how would we do a rolling upgrade? And somehow we got to N-2. I'm not quite sure how. I think it's actually like a version skew thing. I don't know, but I agree that it is. From that perspective, it was driven by what would now be classed as API machinery or architecture, but at the time it was an API machinery compatibility constraint.
So I can comment here. I'll take that as an action item to do that, because we've never actually owned, I wish we could, because then we could enforce, but we've never actually owned the policy. We've always just adhered to, I don't know, the status quo that's existed.
And also Jordan is responsible for providing a pretty big update upgrade policy. So it's really up to him to comment here. I don't know where this policy update came from.
I don't know. I know that Jordan, for a long time, wrote the original doc a while ago, and it's basically a codification of what we already did, for the most part. So I don't know. I think I'll comment here, and we can go back, but we've never really owned it, because if we did, then it would be great. We could change things. But it's always been like this weird, it's got to go to SIGArch because it crosses so many pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and also this relates to the topic where we discovered that the current upgrade policy is not really friendly to the immutable node upgrades, if you remember. I logged the KK ticket for that. Jordan responded with some alternatives. But yeah, it's, I think it's your architecture.
I think so too. All right, next up.
All right, so this is kubedeploy. I found it in the list of sub-projects that we have. So I checked the repository. I believe Justin has the context here. He added this in the agenda.
Yeah, I added a note here. So this was a sort of catch-all repo for deployment tools. The only one that is left is the image builder, which is sort of the old or the first tool that was used to build AWS images or images for AWS, machine images, AMIs. That code is now moved to the image builder subproject, Kubernetes SIG / image builder, maybe. And so we could remove the image builder subdirectory from that repo, and then it would be empty. And then I guess we could delete it. I don't know about like whether we need to keep it for any particular reason. It also then becomes we could use it, repurpose it for something else if anyone has ideas on that. But yes, so that's sort of the, like, you can see the tagline, a place for cluster deployment automation. It was sort of like contrib for various cluster automation tools that have gradually over time moved out of there.
We could probably, I forgot what it's not the attic. I even moved projects there and I forgot the name of it. But it's like the pre-waste bin where we can always take it out if we decide we want to use it still. But there's a separate org where we can transfer non-active projects to, and then it just, if we want to take it out of retirement, we can. But otherwise, if it's not being worked on or maintained, it makes a ton of sense to move it out.
Yeah, I think the only code left is that image builder one, which is sort of the one I work on most on, and I'm fine to move it out from that perspective from the attic or whatever it's called. We could also just move the cluster directory in here. Cause some trouble.
Yeah, you are causing trouble. Like I like that. Can we move that? I don't know.
I'm fine with going into the attic if that's what you want. But like it's also a repo we have in the Kubernetes org, which we could do other things with if we want to.
Yeah, but the question is like, I think that's just a stirring the pot of doom. Like I think the problem we currently have with /cluster is that no one owns it and everyone depends upon it still.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, this all started.
I guess the question is, sorry.
This all started from Lubomir PRing us out of that list and then updating our charter.
Yes, I guess the question for kubedeploy is, should we proceed with a PR to move it to the attic right now, or should we first file a deprecation message in the repo?
I don't know if anyone is confused, as it were. Let me see if there is one in the subdirectory. There is not. That's unfortunate. I can put one in there. I feel like moving a repo is fine in this case.
Why did you put an action item in the doc for me to file the issue to move it?
I mean, I can also do it, Tim, if you want.
Sure. Just file the issue in the K-org. I forgot the name of the organization it is they transfer it to, but just link me the issue, link Justin, Santa Barbara, and myself to that issue, and we'll do the +1s.
Okay. I have the next topic as well. This is a little bit of a presentation for 5 minutes. I can share my screen if you stop sharing. Just a second. This is about the cluster directory actually. So I hope you appreciate my choice of images. Share. Okay, this is an overview of the cluster directory. I did some research and some action items related to this. So what is the cluster directory? The Kubernetes repo, there's a cluster directory. It contains a collection of deprecated and actively maintained components like container images, handle manager, tools for cluster creation. It's mostly bash, YAML is a Docker file. It's tightly coupled to other folders in Kubernetes, hack and test, and also coupled to other repositories such as test infra for end-to-end testing. The goal of the Kubernetes project is to remove cluster eventually. And however, the coupling this is kind of difficult to this point. The cluster directory was originally created in 2014, shortly after the project was open sourced. This implies that KubeUp, the original tool for cluster creation, existed before Kubernetes was open sourced. I'm giving also the commit that performed this action. Over time, the cluster directory accumulated over 9,000 commits. It particularly became a location to add code that does not fit elsewhere. I mean, over-exaggerated, but it looks like this. What does it actually contain? So cluster has add-ons. This is a deprecated add-on manager that is currently used for GCP end-to-end test, to my knowledge. GC, this is the GC provider for KubeUp. I'm going to explain what a provider means later. Images, this is a collection of images for etcd conformance kubemark. Kubemark is the benchmarking tool for Kubernetes, if you don't know. Kubemark is also, there's a kubemark folder that is a provider for KubeUp. I honestly do not know what it is exactly. Walkdump, this is a walkdumping utility. You also have a pre-existing folder. This is another provider for kubemark/KubeUp that I don't understand. And we have Skeleton. Skeleton is basically when you say to KubeUp that there is an empty provider and you don't want to specify something like a backend such as GCE. A provider, it has a couple of meanings. One of them is the infrastructure provider, and the other one is the test scenario provider. So if you remember Kubernetes Anywhere, it acted as both because it was feeding requests for infrastructure, and also it was also the scenario provider because it was setting up kubeadm on the nodes. So how does this relate to sequence lifecycle? Well, after the SIG was created, to my understanding, please correct me, it became the owner of KubeUp as a deployment tool. KubeUp still resides in cluster. At some point, all commits for cluster were labeled with sequence lifecycle as the owner, while in fact owners of some of the subfolders are other SIGs. The SIG has members only in the owners file for the conformance image at this point. I believe this is me and Tim at this point only. KubeUp is deprecated, yet still being the #1 tool for deploying clusters for end-to-end testing Kubernetes. A couple of important recent changes that I did is, first I removed sequence lifecycle as the owner of cluster. Basically, this is just a label, but it also contributed to the statistics of, Kate's DevStats had a lot of PRs from sequence lifecycle while they were touching the cluster folder. So I also made a proposal to move kubeup in a subdirectory, but it was rejected quite aggressively because it's a rather breaking change. The second commit is yet another so this is the second commit I did to remove Kubernetes Anywhere completely because there was still some residual in the Kubernetes and testing for repositories. So this is, I'm not going to bother you with the details too much, but this is how roughly we are currently using end-to-end test with kubeup and the cluster directory. We start a testing scenario. There's a tool in TestDiffer that is called kubetest. It builds the end-to-end test suite. It also runs kubeup with a provider GCE. This creates a cluster. We run tests on the cluster. We delete the cluster. We report results back to the end-to-end test job. Overall, it's quite messy. Some people are going to agree with me that it actually looks like this. Overview of testing using cluster. Well, only a few people understand how this is done. I can pretty much name them because I know who they are. Some insights. In this particular issue comment, I broke down like all the release informing and blocking jobs and what they perform and how they do it. So it's a very detailed analysis of how we use the cluster directory for testing. The kubetest cluster coupling is something that should be ideally resolved by SIG testing because SIG testing are the owners of kubetest. Provided GCP recently forked cluster, started using it for end-to-end test. I did not get all the context for that, but to my understanding is because they don't want to reference the Kubernetes repository directly. Something else to note here is that kubeup is being used by SIG Windows for end-to-end testing of Windows nodes. And this particular usage is even documented. So if we potentially remove kubeup, we also have to update docs. So what's the number of end-to-end tests? So we use cluster, as I mentioned. Cluster GC is owned by the GCP provider. It's up to them to deprecate the usage of this kubeup provider. SIG scalability is something important that they have also tight coupling with the kubemark deployer. And this is, to my knowledge, the only like scale testing we do in Kubernetes. So these are a couple of tracking issues. The first one is something that Tim created. This is removing the cluster directory. And the second one I created is to potentially remove the release blocking kubeup based job and replace them with cluster API. So potential actions. This is something I'm proposing in this meeting. My proposal is that because we haven't submitted any commits for kubeup or reviewing this project anymore, my proposal is that we should just remove it from the list of sub-projects. And after I finish, expect some discussion with this. Cluster API can help with supporting provisioning GC Windows VMs. This is going to replace the kubeup usage for Windows at this point. The second item they can help with is support provisioning for large scale clusters. I don't know if this is in scope for the project, but currently I don't think that kind is something that can be used to replace this. If we decide to not use cluster API for that, we pretty much have to write a new deployer. And the final item that I added here is that gradually we should promote the Kappa and KapG release blocking, jobs to release blocking, because they're currently only informing. So I'm going to leave this slide. I don't have any more slides, I think. So what do you think about the first item, remove kubeup from all the projects?
Yes. I'm happy to, but I think it's going to be a very thorny journey.
Potentially, I'm going to see people objecting to this, but if we are not contributing to the sub project, does it mean that we still have to be the owner?
An advantage of being the owner is we can say no. We can say, no, you can't add your change here. You have to add it to cluster API.
Yeah. But one problem here is that when a couple of slides ago, I mentioned that I tried to move KubeUp in a subfolder, but that broke a number of things. So if we move KubeUp in a subfolder, we can say, hey, we have an owner's file here. We are still the owner of KubeUp specifically. But it was not possible. So now KubeUp still resides in the root of the cluster directory. So it's a folder ownership problem, I guess, also. Are you proposing that if we remove it from the list of subprojects, we should transfer it to another SIG as an action?
I think the problem here is that we'll transfer ownership and no one will be there. It's like, playing catch with no one on the other side. But we're paying for other people's sins too. That's also the problem, right? It's like we've built all this tooling. We'd love it if people could use it. The question is like, there's too much test infra that depends upon it. Test infra has never been on the hook for making major changes that are not outside of, that are in KK proper, right? So like, how can we get test infra to own the pieces, that integration piece to decouple it so that we're not doing all the work of all the dependencies that exist inside of there. Plus there's the image stuff that's inside there, which is also weird.
Yeah, there's also an option that we can just drop the ownership and say that the ownership is vacant for the project. So whoever wants to, they can pick it up.
Why don't we enqueue this for SIG Arch? And let's go there and pick a fight and see what happens. Because like it's been an albatross forever.
I feel like maybe there is an outcome, which is like we can say we will stay owners, but we will not accept. We will like hard deprecate it. We will not accept any changes, and any new functionality that wants to go into it, or any changes that want to go into it, it should instead go to cluster API. And if your test relies on new functionality, it's now going to have to bring up cluster API. And it'd be great to get. I don't know what that means. It would be great to get the. Sorry, it would be great to get a first test running using cluster API, so we can say, look, just add it here, follow this example PR. But like, I feel like the making it unowned is not going. It's going to make it worse for us. It's just going to like, in terms of getting rid of cluster, it's going to just have more and more stuff going into cluster.
Well, then again, we have a big gating anything. Since I've been in the project, I haven't seen. Since. I guess Robert, since Robert left his approval status of the cluster directory, I haven't seen us in particular gating anything for this directory.
Yeah, I'm suggesting if we were to continue as owners, that can be our like negotiating tactic with cigars. Like if we're going to continue as owners, we are going to lock it down and say no to everything.
Yes, I think this is a very good argument. So I think there's a SIG Arch meeting this week, maybe. If you can join the meeting, I would be happy to have this as an agenda. I see some people raising hands. Elbico? Okay, Fabrizio?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I was just curious, do we know what the people on the testing side of the house, think about this? Because I like the approach is like, if we're going to continue to own this, then taking a strong stance towards, we'd like to deprecate it and move to something else seems appropriate. But it sounds like we need all the testing folks to understand like what's going to happen. Is there any indication about that?
So they've known about this problem for years and they've made no changes into this area. So like the problem is with the project of KK is that it's been it's slowly whittling down to a skeleton crew in the core that actually know how all this stuff is, I don't know, Rube Goldberg together. And the only way to do that is for people to step up and to actually disentangle the hairball that is there. I liken it to like trying to disentangle like a snarl on a cat while the cat's awake.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I spent several days last week trying to understand the EDE testing that was all encoded there, and yeah, like I can get that this is difficult to do. I feel like I like these kind of hardline stances of like if we're going to own it and we want to move towards something else, then we have to say, yeah, we're not going to accept more changes here. We'd like them to go to this other place. But it sounds like you said, to untangle this knot, testing has to be included in all this.
Maybe we let's go to Sigarch and have this conversation, and we'll try to frame it. I think definitely bring your slides, Lubomir, and it's a nice sort of outline of the mess, and then we can have it needs to be like a sympathetic conversation. Be like, this is unmaintained. It's just a mess. It's a burden.
So there's a Sigarch on Thursday.
Yep, I just added it to my calendar.
Yeah. Okay, we can do that.
Sorry, I can't find the button, so I'm raising my hand physically. I just want to say, like, KubeMark is essentially a version of Kubelet. To my understanding, it's a version of Kubelet which doesn't has like a null CRI provider, so it doesn't actually launch any containers. So it's used for like benchmarking. It brings up everything and it runs through. It might actually run through the EDE tests, but it just doesn't launch any containers. So it can't run.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I know
it's possible to move it to kind, maybe, was what I was wondering.
Yeah, it's good. Ben said that it might be very difficult to get infrastructure that is going to support 5,000, small containers for the nodes. Or
I mean, there are two tests. There's a scale test, which is like 5,000 nodes, and there's KubeMark, which, to my understanding, is actually just like not that demanding of the machine because it just does the scheduling and the controllers, but it doesn't actually run any pods. Doesn't actually run any containers, I'm sorry.
It's mainly for control plane testing and verification, to be honest. Like, because you'll uncover weird things with the control plane in a localized environment. And also, I'm sorry, because Merrick and Wojtek and I helped build KubeMark a long time ago.
Fabrizio, you had a comment?
Yeah, my comment is that if we want to tackle this discussion, it will be great to have CapG in a better shape so we can put an alternative on the table.
Well, now, AWS. I mean, like, it's like a nice shot across the bow too. Like we resource and we recommend AWS provider. Like, I have empathy, but also at the same time I have frustration because I know, like, you can only do so much. You're being tapped. People have bled resources off of main KK for a long time. So I think if they don't kind of pony up to do some of this hard work, it becomes really difficult for the project to be sustainable over the long haul.
Okay, fine for me. As soon as we go to the discussion and we have an alternative, and we can say it is there, it works, we are using it. It's just a matter to expand its usage.
So just quickly going back to it's sort of a stick that we have for gating changes. Something that the argument is not strong about is that actually this section here, these bash scripts here, don't see that much changes at all. So people are not really going to care who is the owner. If we also don't have people in the owner's file. so we cannot technically gate it. So we either have to have owners or transfer the ownership at this point. These files, like I said, I mean, I see some 3 months updates, updates 3 months ago, but this is probably a typo fix or something like that. These 28 days ago are my changes. So I think we should either add owners here or propose to vacate CubeUp and the collection of bash here to whoever wants to take it. But yeah, let's have the discussion on Sigard's meeting, I guess.
Yeah, let's table this for now because I think it's a broader problem that entangles a bunch of people. So I think we should have it there. And I'll talk to Aaron ahead of time. Too.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I could continue sharing, I guess. So,
yeah.
Agenda.
You got the meeting notes up?
Yes.
Right. Should we just go to readouts so you can start it off?
Yes, unless somebody else has group discussion topics. Okay, so project readouts, Cubadian, we spent a lot of time last week debugging end-to-end test flakes. So it was quite problematic, but we sent a couple of PRs to try to fix what we saw as failures. And also I added a link for a kip that we are planning to implement as a feature for 1.19. This is to use raw patches for customizing the control plane static pods. Okay, Justin Cops.
There we go, phew. Can you hear me? Yes. I think we've more or less, historically, we've always been like well behind on COPS, and actually we've sort of caught up now, but now we are sort of facing a new release problem, which I think is sort of interesting, again, from the sort of cross-project perspective, which I'll try to focus on. So we continue to have a ton of changes going in now to our master branch, and we haven't cut a like branch for 118, which is the one that we like, we're probably now a little overdue to release, but not too overdue. And we want to cut that branch to stabilize it, but if we cut the branch today, then we don't get as much test coverage. Most of our test coverage focuses on the master branch. So I think that's going to be our next release architecture decision, which is like, how do we balance stabilizing versus testing versus all of these things? And it might just be that we need to test both the latest release branch and the master branch. But yeah, it's an interesting new problem for us.
I do know that the CAPI folks have done a lot of end-to-end test automation that they've built up for getting periodics in place across multiple branches. I don't know if you have periodics too as well, or if it's just actually from the...
Yeah, we're all periodics, or we're almost all periodics. Like the bulk of our testing comes from periodics, certainly of scenarios. And yeah, I think we just need to add another attribute to the matrix, which is like test master versus test the latest release branch.
Just does this also mean that you have to cut the branches early as possible? Like,
yeah, I mean, this is exactly what we need to figure out, right? Like, when should we cut the branch? We had a period over the past, I guess, year where we had, I think, 3 release branches open at once, which was a little uncomfortable in terms of the volume of cherry picking that required. I mean, it was fine with scripting, but it was more overhead than we'd like. And there is a trade-off between when you cut the branch. Like today, we have the 118 alphas, for example, coming off master. So any PR that goes in, like, will go into the next like release, but that makes it like much harder to get that 118 to beta type thing. So when is the right time to cut that release branch and start taking the pain of cherry picking, but get to earlier stabilization? And probably we should cut the release 119 branch around now if we want to have a beta around 119 release, but we don't know.
Yeah, the Kubernetes release branch cutting right now starts after the recent changes. The branch cutting starts when code freeze begins. So it's much later in the cycle. So you might have to cut it before the KK branch. It's tricky, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe code freeze is the right time, because then we have something to point to. Sort of politically, we can say, well, Kubernetes is doing it, so we should do it at the same time.
Yeah, you know, the whole repository dependency management is very difficult, and that's why I wanted KubeADM to follow the release cycle exactly, because it saves us a lot of trouble. Discussions from before that we had, it's not clear how kubectl are going to do it. Pretty much everything trying to decouple from a cadence of a core project is very painful. And no, I've seen projects out there that follow a very strict, precise cadence for all their modules, and they have massive repositories in projects out there. Kubernetes is not that big compared to some of the projects out there. But yeah, this is another topic for SIG architecture potentially, maybe for another time.
Thank you.
Right, this cluster API.
So real quick, we got two releases, 0211, 036 out. They both kind of like have like a lot of bug fixes. 0211 was released because we found an issue when you had like a cluster with two existing V1 Alpha 2 and V1 Alpha 3 controllers running at the same time. So these two releases fix that. We have a lot of proposals in progress for V1 Alpha 3. I sent out an email to the SIG, and if you have any like questions, comments, concern on those, like they are in progress, and we have like a lot of PRs out like to get these proposals. The time frame is probably going to be June, July to just get them implemented. But yeah, there's a lot going on. So we have conditions, remediation, extended remediation, I should say, both in KCP and for external. So for infrastructure provider specific remediation. We have multi-tenancy. In this case, like we're tackling AWS first. KPK support for volume add at CD and getting file from secrets so that you don't have like bootstrap data with secrets in it. Cluster cattle templating, cluster resource sets, which also known as post-apply. And then we have machines lifecycle hooks and extending the object to know which template it came from. This is almost like a summary, like look at the email for the links to the Google Docs/PRs.
I think the one thing that's worth calling out, especially to this group, is like, as we talk about the /cluster directory, is all the different tests that folks have been working on too, and the set of end-to-end tests, especially the upgrade tests. Those are really important because they help to highlight, like, we are doing all the testing and potentially even more than what currently you get for release blocking signal.
Yeah, I can drop a link to the end-to-end test that we have today in here.
I think it's also important to delegate as much as possible to local testing instead of spinning whole clusters to perform an action. It comes with a cost because you have to maintain the proud jobs. You start basically relying on external factors to get your signal. So
They do that for the Cappy repo where they have the Docker provider, which is kind of like Kind. So a lot of the test automation exists there, but I think if you're testing a provider, it's a provider. So, you know, they got periodics and stuff.
Yeah, this whole like effort was done in a way that like you could swap in providers. So like the same exact test you can run with CapD for us for Cappy, so we can get signal, but also like you can use the same test with a different configuration to run it in AWS. And this effort to move AWS to this new test framework is underway. So we'll definitely get there, and we'll probably have like a lot more to show probably by the end of the month or starting next.
I think the big thing that we need to start to track as we start to reduce the state space of cluster is that there are a set of weird tests that exist in / cluster for hardware enablement and other stuff that don't exist really anywhere else. And once we get to like that space, that's going to be like the long tail, like how do we do certain hardware enablements and stuff.
Yeah, having a feature like gap analysis would be great there. I think Lubomir has like done a great job. I know you're looking at the failure. Is that this is because like it runs on every PR? I don't think we have like a periodic yet. Fabrizio, can you speak to that maybe?
No, we have a periodic. We have some periodic. Is Cappy end-to-end test, which is a periodic one, if I remember well.
Oh, so this one is the periodic that's failing, so maybe we should look at it. There you go.
This one is a post-submit.
Okay.
by the way, me and Fabrizio saw some, like I would say, like degraded performance in Prowl in terms of CPU and networking resources, and I'm not sure what was causing that, but it solved itself, so it was temporary. We were seeing basically like simple tasks like pulling something from the internet and building something require like 5 times the time basically. So it was confusing, but it solved. Fabrizio, did you manage to see an improvement in the cluster API end-to-end tests?
No, I still observe high variability. There are, for instance, I'm checking the upgrade test, and the upgrade test goes from the really same test goes from 10 minutes passing to more than 30 minutes, the same test.
I see. Hopefully it's going to improve. Yeah, Nadir is saying that better started some machines to resolve the high CPU. I guess we should see. I'm going to watch the kinder test as well to see how they are doing. Yeah. Any questions for Cluster API? Okay, HDDM.
Hi. Yeah, minor update. There's a PR for supporting a separate metrics URL, which is nice if you want to not have to rely on the etcd. It's like client or yeah, client certs, you know, for something like Prometheus, querying the metrics, and that's about it right now.
Yeah, I think somebody wanted to work on a corporate config for etcd-ADM. Do you know what is the state of that?
I don't. I know that someone did apply for a I think a Google Summer of Code to work on a control plane provider for cluster API that would use etcd-ADM, but I think that proposal was not accepted. but I don't know about the component config. That would be great.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that they already implemented some sort of a config in their fork of
Oh.
etcd.
Okay, I missed that.
Yeah, I guess Google Summer of Code can help, but it's designing API is really not something that is very easy. But yeah, I guess help is appreciated for this.
Oh, that's great. I buried in my GitHub notifications, I guess.
Daniel, do you happen to know why etcd added the listen? So etcd has a listen metrics URL that is applicable for both the health endpoint and the metrics endpoint. Do you know why they didn't pick separate flags that control the endpoints of the server?
I don't. I think the motivation behind the separate URL was to allow HTTP. So yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a concern, or
No, it's not. I'm just
versus
why they made this decision. It's because when you do this on the etcd server, you get a metrics and a health check on the same host you provide here.
Mm-hmm.
That is missing. But anyway, I was curious if you know. Okay, questions for etcd ADM? Okay, Sharif, Minikube.
Yeah. So we released 110 last week. 110 mostly has improvements for Podman with Cryo. So that's slowly creeping its way out of experimental state. So you can use Minikube on like Fedora and stuff like that, because Docker is impossible to install in Fedora now. And then we released 110.1 the next day because it turns out Windows was totally busted. So 111 is going to focus on getting our Windows integration test infrastructure back up and running, which with the help of SIG Windows, we have some VMs that are running our tests on them again. So that's what we're going to focus on for the next couple weeks.
Yes, I saw some discussions with the SIG Windows folks. Help you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, questions for Minikube? All right, I don't see any updates on Costa. He was supposed to do a presentation today, but he's missing. Maybe he's busy. Corporate standard, I think they are canceled their last meeting pretty much again. I have another group topic, but we only have 10 minutes and it's a complicated one again. Do you want your 10 minutes back, or?
Well, we're here. We only meet bi-weekly, so if you want to start some drama, Lubomir, now's the time.
Yeah. So, Dims is on a mission. I'm going to add this back to the top, I guess. Just a second. So Dims is on a mission to completely remove Docker regime.
Which is a good mission.
Yes, it's becoming more and more possible because they now can build the Kubernetes without Docker regime, and potentially to my understanding, the agreement is to move Docker regime to a new repo. At least I'm hoping that this is what they're going to do. And to my understanding, SIG Node wants to stop supporting it. So this is a question now because SIG lifecycle has users out there still using Docker. SIG Windows, it's still a dependency for them. Containerd for Windows is not in a good state. So that's another question is, should we take ownership of the Docker regime, or like who is going to potentially update to CRI next if such an update happens?
what is the problem with containerd on Windows that doesn't allow us to? That seems like a weird one because we switched everything else to use containerd for our stuff. So
Yeah, to my knowledge, it's still it has problems related to the Windows kernel, but it's very actively being worked on, and I guess people like Michael can provide a better update for this. But I do understand that containerd is going to be the preferred container runtime for Windows too. But so this is long term. Short term, what do we do with all the kubeadm users that use Docker?
I think we could still have the tests. Are you talking about like there are pieces? It's a good question.
Well, that's basically the ownership of the Docker regime. If SIG node doesn't want to maintain it, should the other SIGs step in to, potentially maintain it until we completely remove Docker support of Kubernetes, which is kind of quite a surprise to. It's going to be quite a surprise to people out there.
I think we should start an email. On this particular one, I think we should start an email on Devel and Arch list because this affects a lot of people. So we want to make sure that we do right by the community here and at least talk about it in the open. I think if we're going to do this, I think we need to go through a formal deprecation cycle, right? And so that way we give plenty of notification out there that we are deprecating Docker support unless somebody steps up over here, and our preference will be default to containerd. And I think as long as we do the full deprecation policy and procedure, I think that we'd be okay. But I think socializing it first is probably important.
Okay. I'm already watching their existing discussions there. So once I see potential caps to move Docker regime to a new repository, which means that Docker regime is not going to be part of the release anymore, I'm going to start the discussion because we have to walk on that and see what people think.
Yay, drama.
All right, that's all I have. Sorry for speaking too much.
It was all good. I have the follow-up for SIGArch for later on this week. I think that's going to be a fun conversation to have. So,
yeah. All right. Anybody have last-minute topics? Right. Thanks, everybody. See you again in a couple of weeks.